Yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark Hanna and I'm the publisher of the Rio Grande Guardian, and today we're having an exciting conversation with the one and only state representative, Armando Martinez. Representative Martinez, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Mark. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having this.
We know that you were very busy the past few months, the 85th legislative session, and we're going to have a fun conversation about the things that happened. We're going to focus on transportation because transportation is one thing that the Rio Grande Valley, it's going to take us to another level.
Absolutely.
But before we get started on the conversation, we kind of want to take the time to remember September 11th, 2001. Representative Martinez, you're actually a first responder, and tell us, where were you on September 11th?
And Mark, thank you so much for remembering our firefighters, our first responders, our police officers, EMS personnel, and all our men and women in uniform for their hard work and dedication. I still remember that I was in the back of an ambulance. We were transporting a patient. We had an early morning call. When I was in the back of the ambulance, we had the radio on, and you could hear on 94.5 Big Al and Charlie. They were talking about a small plane had just crashed into the World Trade Center. And I was thinking to myself, wow, what would a small plane be doing in that area? So when we got to the hospital and we were moving the patient over and transferring the care to the nurses and the physician, everybody was just glued to the TV, and it turned out to be, American Airlines. And then you saw the United flight coming in and crashing into the other World Trade Center and tower, and just in total disbelief. And it's kind of like the world stopped, and nobody knew what to say. We were just in sheer terror and wondering what was going on. We were just under attack by cowardly terrorists, obviously. But let me tell you that the United States is the greatest country on earth, and even though we had cowardly terrorists try to tear down our tallest buildings and crash into the Pentagon, and we had, of course, heroes on those the other plane that crashed into Pennsylvania, they could not tear apart this great nation. And one thing that we always see is that our firefighters, our police officers, our first responders, men and women in uniform, are always acting out there to improve the lives and save the lives of people. We lost over 343 firefighters in New York, and every year our firefighters come together and we remember that. And it's just, it's so, I guess it's so interesting to think that it happened 16 years ago.
I know. And
how the devastation that occurred that day. But in remembrance every year, I just can't help but thanking everybody out there for their hard work and their dedication for keeping us safe. All of our first responders, my brothers and my sisters in uniform that are working hard to keep us safe every day. And when many people are running out of fires or from falling buildings or evacuating from natural disasters, our first responders are the ones that are running in there to save lives. And one other thing I just want to say is that we remember 9/11 and our first responders. But then when you also think of Hurricane Harvey, and then now Hurricane Irma, and our first responders that are going out there to, work hard and to save lives, I also want to thank all the people from the Rio Grande Valley. There was so many people that came together that went out to help those who were devastated by Hurricane Harvey. And that's one thing about the people of the Rio Grande Valley, that they came together, when we needed boats and we needed help, and everybody from first responders to the citizen did a wonderful job. And I'm proud to be from the Rio Grande Valley, and I'm proud to represent this area, because that's one thing we have is a huge heart, and we go out to help. So,
and it's very interesting that I believe that where all the sum of our experiences has set you up, for the duty that you're doing at the state level. What have you taken away from a leadership standpoint as a first responder, and then obviously watching your brothers and sisters?
Right. Well, one of the things that I can always say is that we've always remained humble, and you always think of others. Being a public servant my whole life, and I can say that because whether it's being a first responder or being an elected public official, having compassion. and that's the most important thing.
Compassion. He wears a Superman shirt underneath the suit, so he just, when he walks out, he just kind of takes it off. And, well, we want to thank everyone for tuning in. We've got Leroy commented, Leroy Cavazos from the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber, hashtag Ando con Mando. Leroy, thank you for tuning in. Tony Flores, he says, hey, rep. So, hey, back to you, Tony. Let's get into the 85th legislative session. How did the 85th legislative start versus how did it finish? When you were going in, I mean, everyone's pumped. You know, when you're heading in, hey, we're going to fight for a certain amount of bills, and we're going to, you know, represent our people well. And then at the end, you know, there's a different feeling. Right. What were the two feelings?
You know, it's like I always said. I've always said this, is that every legislative session is different. They all have a different dynamic. They start differently, they end differently. But, you know, I want to really thank all the members of the Valley delegation. I think we have one of the greatest delegations ever. Everybody works together and has, you know, their heart in the right place and wanting to do what's right for the people, not only for the Valley, the area, but of course the state of Texas. And also our Speaker of the House. I think Joe Strauss did a tremendous job. I mean, you know, as much flack as he was getting, as hard it was to deal with the Senate, I think our Speaker did a tremendous job in guiding and shepherding legislation through the House, legislation that was very important for the people of Texas. And it's not just a small group of people. He was looking out for, you know, the entire state and what the impacts are and how the economy would shape out with what we're doing. And I really applaud him for his hard work. But, you know, we have a lot of special members in the Valley who contributed well. You know, Oscar Longoria did a great job as the Vice Chair of Appropriations and working very hard. And you have to give credit where credit is due. You know, I know Sergio Munoz was also in Appropriations. You have Bobby Guerra on Public Health and Rene Oliveira, Chairman Oliveira, who chairs the Business and Industry Committee, and of course you have Eddie Lucio III. So all of us together, and being the Vice Chair of Transportation, I think we all work together for the issues of the Valley and thinking about infrastructure and transportation and education and healthcare and what those impacts would do and what we could bring to the Valley. And I think we fared out pretty well.
You know, and sometimes people, you know, we don't want to go into a political science lesson or anything like that, but basically, you know, you have 149 other members that are from all over Texas that have different views, a different set of constituents. They're all Texans, right? So it's very difficult to work with a group of 5 people sometimes, let alone 149 other people. How do you communicate with the other legislators?
You know, I think you have 100, and it's like you say, you have 149 other ideas and opinions. You know, and I think it's about getting your information across, being able to, you know, inform them of the needs of the Valley. I think one of the greatest things that we do every session is the Rio Grande Valley Partnership and the Valley Tour, and bringing our legislators from other parts of the state to see exactly what the Valley is about. You know, for so many years, some of the legislators thought, wow, do we need to wear bulletproof vests when we get down there? But as soon as we bring them down here, they understand that how beautiful the Valley is, that there isn't bloodshed on the streets or cars blowing up or, you know, things of that nature. We have, the Valley is beautiful and it's growing and it's vibrant and it's safe, and we have a great law enforcement community. Our sheriff is doing a wonderful job. I think all of our municipal police officers are doing a wonderful job. And of course, a DPS. There are some, you know, questionable acts that we have on the amount of money that is funded, but all in all, the Valley is safe, it's vibrant, it's a great place for people to come and live, come and visit, and be a part of and share that. You know, I always talk to Representative Terry Canales on a lot of what we do, and he did a wonderful job this session as well. And we continuously talk about the improvements in the Valley and what we're showing, and I think it just it really shows who we are down here and what we can do.
And you know, when thinking about this at the state level, you know, is it a sprint or a marathon?
I think at first you start out with a brisk, a warm up. You know, it's kind of a walk. Yeah, and then you start doing your speed walking, and then after that, once you get into March, April, it is a marathon from there. And you need to make sure that you're at the front of the pack and that you're getting your legislation moved, especially important legislation.
Yeah.
So to a lot of the incoming freshmen that come and ask for advice, I always say make sure you have your legislative agenda prepared. Because it starts off slow, but then it ends up really, really fast. And if you don't have that going, you're going to have some trouble.
And what about seniority at the state level? How important is seniority, and what is your seniority?
I am 30 out of 150, so that's my seniority level. Seniority is extremely important, not only because you're able to move up into the Capitol, but you also choose the committees that you want to be on. You get a seniority pick, although the speaker does make those final appointments.
Yeah.
You have so many more people that you have talked to and built relationships with, and you have the networking, and you build those relationships to get things done. So whether it was senators that have been in the House, you have that type of relationship to go and talk to them and get your legislation passed. And vice versa. You have members in the House that, even though they're Democrat or Republican, you go and you talk to them, you've built those relationships over the years, and you're able to pass your legislation and move it through. So seniority is extremely, extremely important in the legislature.
Anything else about the beginning of the legislative session that you want to share? Any exciting stories?
Well, I mean, it's pretty much, you're preparing your stuff. You hear so much.
Yeah.
You hear so much about the legislation that's coming down, about what's going to be proposed, and you're pretty much anticipating that type of legislation and preparing yourself for debate and kind of getting everybody organized and together. And, of course, we saw some of the legislation that was proposed, things that we didn't agree with, things that a lot of Republicans didn't agree with, and because in all reality, we should be there to serve the people of Texas and to pass legislation that's going to be important for them and how it impacts their lives positively. Make sure we have jobs and healthcare and education, infrastructure and transportation, and those are issues that we should focus on first before looking at anything else.
And, those are things that there's not really a divider. It's not a red or blue issue.
Right.
Those are, education, everyone. Transportation, everyone. Healthcare, everyone.
Absolutely.
And so these are issues that they affect the quality of life to everyone, which is why it's super important that people vote and that
Correct.
people stay involved.
Anything
you want to share on that?
And that's one thing that I think a lot of people really need to look at. It's not just a one issue agenda that you go in to vote for somebody. I mean, when we have legislators running on education, and then you look at some of the draconian cuts that have happened in the past,
Yeah.
I think our teachers, our educators really need to go out and look at that. For our retired teachers, they haven't received a cost of living increase since the 90s. And every year we file legislation to address that and try to give them that cost of living increase. And it seems like it's not that important for the majority at times. And to me, our retired teachers, that is the base of our foundation of where we started. I've always said there's 3 reasons for success in my life. Every day, every time we're in the legislature, we need to address those issues and be able to take care of our retired teachers, our educators in general.
Education is the foundation to the world, right? It all starts with education.
Absolutely.
Let's get into transportation. Now, you sit on the transportation committee, correct?
Correct.
Talk to us about why transportation is important, because sometimes people don't think about it like they should.
Right, exactly. Well, transportation is extremely important. I've been very lucky that Speaker Strauss appointed me for the past 3 terms as a vice chair of transportation. I've also been lucky. I've been on transportation for a total of 4 terms, and it has been very enlightening because you think of the valley and the growth of the valley. And you don't realize how important transportation is until you're driving to the interchange at 7:15 in the morning and you're backed up to Alamo.
Yeah.
That is why transportation is so important, and our dollars in infrastructure. And when I talk about infrastructure is not only roads but also drainage.
Yeah.
You think about our roads being paved, but our roads have to have adequate drainage so that they don't flood and people can evacuate. You need to have alternate routes and alternate means of transportation as well, because it's not only cars and highways on the road. We're also talking about airports. We're talking about buses and mass transit. We're talking about trains as well. And we should excuse me, always think out of the box and have additional ideas of alternate means of transportation, because of the amount of growth and the capacity that we have. And if you don't have the amount of dollars that are available to build more roads, you need to start thinking, what do we need to do? There's been talks about, what about raising the gas tax? And I think it depends on how much we want to raise it, and it depends on if it's going to be for how long of a time. But what will the impact be in dollars? We haven't done that in years. There's been talks about that, or vehicle registration fees. When we passed Prop 1 and Prop 7, which the state of Texas and people across the state voted unanimously for because of shortage in funding in transportation, it did address some of the need. But when you have a $26 billion budget in transportation, and the majority of that is only going to repairs and maintenance, you don't have so much for new roads.
It's a repair.
Right, exactly.
It's just a repair. You're not building for the future needs.
Correct.
And, this past year, we just had a whole batch of high school students graduate. We have incoming sophomores and juniors that are getting their driver's license, and, populations are growing very fast. Yeah. So transportation it doesn't seem important until you're stuck in traffic.
Correct.
And it doesn't seem important until there's a storm and the drainage, isn't up to par and you're not able to drive. The road is great, but it's flooded. But the issue seems to always go back to the funding mechanisms.
Correct.
There's more needs than there is funds.
Correct.
So at the state level, how do you have to get creative to look for new revenue streams and solutions? How do you do that?
Right, and I think it's just a matter of everybody thinking out of the box. One of the issues, or one of the ideas in the past, has been toll roads. And people have said, well, we don't like toll roads. Toll roads are bad. Why am I going to pay to get on a road when it should be free? Well, a lot of what happens is that, when that toll road is built, and it's built by a private company, they'll come in, they completely finance it, and it's paid for. So what happens if that road goes under? Who's responsible for it? Well, it goes back to the private builder. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like what happened on State Highway 130 going south down into south, going towards San Antonio into Seguin. And so when you see that road and the fact that it went belly up, or the private investor went belly up, there was the state didn't have any risk. Nobody was tied to it. We didn't pay any money for it. So now they're refinancing it, bringing back up, which actually I drive that when I go to Austin. I take I-10, I take the loop, 410 in San Antonio, go to I-10 into Seguin and straight up into Austin and go the back way. And it shaves off about 30 minutes and you're not stuck in traffic. So maybe a few bucks more, but yeah. I'd rather pay that being stuck in traffic. And but that's why it's an option. And I think I've always been a tool in the toolbox kind of guy, that have those tools available to where if you need them, you can utilize them. So CDAs, which are comprehensive development agreements, which is where private developers come in and say, you need so many miles of road, we can finance it, build it for this much, and the tolls would cost, and it doesn't have to be tolled. It's just the availability for that tool to be there. But it would be so much over so many years, and they have a kind of like a lease buyback sort of structure. But that's another tool. P3s, public-private partnerships, are other types of tools also. So to have those tools available when you don't have money is a must.
Yeah, of course.
Is a must.
Yeah.
And I agree with a lot of people about toll roads and the fact that, hey, it could impact a community. But number one is we never toll existing roads, not to ever toll existing roads. Number two is have a free option. So if you're not going to get on the toll road, you don't want to pay to get on the toll road, you have a free option on the side, which is what they do many times. They have the free lanes, which are the frontage roads that people can get on and stay on. So you have a free option to the public. And I've always had a problem with people having to direct, when they try to get them to direct them onto a toll road and not have an access. That becomes a problem. But I think there's ways around it, and there's options available so that we can provide our public with with transportation and the needs of our area.
And I know for a fact that you have a solid team behind you that is always helping you, resourceful information, etc. How important is it to have a solid team?
Oh, extremely important. Extremely important to have that team with you. I mean, our office is made up of some really, really good people. Here in Wesco, we have Magali and we have Paco, our legislative director, and of course Scott, my chief of staff, who's been with me since day one, as Magali. And it's good to have this team together because Paco takes over and looks at all of our legislative agendas and what we need to have before me and supplies us with information, and then also having the contacts at TxDOT. Texas Department of Transportation has done a tremendous job. Now we do have a new district engineer here in FAR, and Pete Alvarez, who is amazing, and he's done a great job. In the past, I've known him when he was a deputy engineer, and then he moved to Laredo, and we've stayed in touch, and I'm very happy that he's back in the Valley and now being the district engineer here. So it's very important to have a good team in order to communicate and have that relationship.
Well, let's get into the session. The first item that we wanted to talk about was the Regional Transit Authority for the RGV. It's something that you've been pushing, and you're going to continue to push.
Correct.
Talk to us a little bit about what this is and why it's beneficial.
Okay, so a little background is back in the 50s, the late 50s, early 60s, we had rail here in the Valley. We had passenger rail here in the Valley. And if you go to big cities across the state, everybody has rail. And if you go up to the Northeast, everybody has rail. And if you go to the West, everybody has rail. But the Valley doesn't have it.
There's a pattern.
Right. and you hear it so many times from constituents. Why do the big cities have it and we don't? Medical school, a law school, passenger rail. We don't have it. Exactly. We don't. And what I passed in 2007 was the creation of a commuter rail district that allowed the counties along the border to create a rail district authority so we could start looking and implementing ways to bring back passenger rail into the Valley. Because as we talked about as options, what other options do we have when you can no longer expand your expressway north and south, because we don't have any more land to expand. So you need to think of options of mass transit and how people could get from point A to point B. And the idea is to have a rail system that goes from Brownsville all the way to Rio Grande City, and then a busing system. Because right now we do have a good busing system, but it's kind of a wheel and spoke. So your rail comes in, drops off the passenger, they get on a bus, and they get to the next destination. So, for example, if you would have somebody from La Feria that needed to go to see the doctor here in Wesco because you have the medical center, or you have Knapp Medical Center, and you have doctor's offices all around, they would get on a train, come down to Wesco, get on a bus, and take them directly down to that medical center. Same thing to going and visiting, across the border. They could get on a bus, go down to the Donna International Bridge, Donna Rio Bravo Bridge, go down and go to Mexico, come back, same thing, or the Progreso International Bridge, or the FAR, or so on and so forth. So there's many benefits to it. So what we wanted to do is, the next step was, now that we had created a commuter rail district, it was to have an all-encompassing, valley-wide rail district authority. So that's when we came up with the idea of a regional transit authority. They have them all across the state, Dallas, and you have them at Houston. Everybody has a transit authority. So DART, Dallas Area Rapid Transit, that's one of the best and very good system. I've ridden it several times. I've gone and visited with the people there, especially when we were putting our ideas together. So what we did is we said, well, everybody needs to have a stake in it, and every city must have a voice. So we decided that the board would be devised of the COG, or the Council of Governments. So that way, every member from the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council would have a voice in that regional transit authority, and putting that together to where you have busing and rail all under one umbrella. And working with each one of the communities has been great. Paco did a lot of work. Paco Sanchez here from my office did a tremendous job in putting that together, and working with all of the communities, and contacting city managers and people of the mass transit divisions, and addressing that has been great. And we got everybody on board, no pun intended, and we moved forward, and we presented it this legislative session.
And what was the feedback? By the way, Ron Garza is watching, so thank you, Ron, for tuning in.
Big supporter.
Yeah.
Ron Garza is a great guy, and we really like him and glad that he's there at Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council.
So how was this received? And before we get into that, it is a taxing entity. How would that work?
Okay, well, first of all, that would need to go out, and it would need to be voted on by the public. So
Okay.
if you would allow it to become a taxing entity, the voters would need to decide first, and
Yeah.
that's what we made sure we wanted to put in there. But it has, the exception in there. You can still start it, get it going, and not create the taxing authority at that moment.
Okay, so
But
you can plan.
You can plan for it, and right when you're prepared to do it, then you can go out, put it on on the ballot, and see if the voters want it. So.
And this, where exactly would the funds come from? If it was voted on, what would be taxed basically?
Ad valorem taxes.
Okay.
That's basically where it would come from. But what we did is we also, to get something going, is we were working with the bridges, the international bridges, and giving them an option to buy in or stay out. It was an opt-in kind of section in there that said if they want to be a part of the Regional Transit Authority, they would increase their fees by so much, maybe a quarter per passenger vehicle and 10 cents per pedestrian.
Yeah.
And then that money would go back into the Regional Transit Authority, and so much would be divided for rail, transit, and back to the entity for any type of infrastructure improvements.
And this is a phenomenon that's happening across the country, except some parts of the country are already looking at the next phase. They're looking at things like the Hyperloop.
Right.
They're looking at other things, ways of transportation, because in addition to it being convenient and people having options, a lot of people spend a vast amount of their day being transported in the vehicle. And how much more time could you spend being a productive citizen, at your job or with your kids or with your family if you didn't spend so much time traveling, right?
Absolutely.
And then the other aspect is that when you have a transportation infrastructure with different options, the quality of life increases.
Absolutely.
And it also attracts possible developers to come into a region because they see that you have that infrastructure. You have big companies that say, hey, my employees would want to live here in this quality of life. Talk to us a little bit about that aspect of transportation.
And I think you bring up a good point there, Mark, because you have options. You would be able to have a rail, bus. I mean, now we have Uber and Lyft.
Yeah.
But along with those options and being able to create an area to where now developers want to come in and they want to build, because you see it in Austin. I use either rideshare or maybe the bus, or in Dallas you ride the train, or in Houston you ride the train, or in New York you ride the train. So
yeah.
I'm all about mass transit. I'm all about different options in rideshare, but you also have to look at the safety aspect of it. I mean, how many times do we want to go out to a concert and have a good time, and maybe have a few beverages, adult beverages, and you shouldn't be driving.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's much easier to either ride share or take the bus, get on a train, and get home.
Yeah.
And much safer for the moving public out there. And not only does it reduce the congestion on the roads, but it also reduces the ability of an accident or the event of a major traumatic event that could happen.
What about a job creator? How big of a job creator is transportation? Because there's short-term jobs in the actual
Right.
construction aspect,
Correct.
but long-term.
I think, well, once you have the infrastructure and the creation of a good transportation system, well, then you're going to have people wanting to develop along those corridors, and then with that, when you develop that, you bring in other types of businesses, maybe restaurants, hotels, so on and so forth. And that as a job creator in itself, because
Yeah.
now you have people that need to be employed for those restaurants, you have people that need to be employed in those hotels, and maybe even businesses around there, doctors' offices, dental offices, professional offices where you have attorneys and businesses and so on and so forth. So everybody's going to want to be building, their businesses around those corridors for access. And then, of course, you need to employ people, not only, like you said, in the construction aspect, but long term as they're building out over the years.
And being that this regional transit authority, that it would be a taxing entity. When people are going to be taxed, they always want to know, okay, well, what am I going to receive
Right.
in return? And a lot of it could be an increase in sales revenue as well, because people are able to drive around easier. People are able to come from the other side of the border from Mexico. There's a lot of things to look at. But I think that the taxpayer would want to say, okay, if we're going to do this, are we going to receive more or less?
Right, correct. And I'm glad you bring that up, because I, as a taxpayer, I think of it the same way. If I'm paying taxes, I want to see what I'm getting
Correct.
in return.
Yeah.
I want to be able to touch it and feel it and see exactly what is it that I am paying for.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the worry from people is the fact that, if we get taxed, well, what are they going to do with it? And where's it going to go? And another tax, and, we're overtaxing and overburdening, and that's the last thing we want to do. But we want to make sure that when people, if people are paying a tax for whatever it is, that they can see exactly what they're getting in return.
Yeah. And so how do you show people drainage and infrastructure that's underneath the road? That's the hardest part to show the taxpayer, right?
But the easiest thing, the way you show it, is when it rains and it doesn't flood,
There we
and
go.
you can have access. That's how they can see that their tax dollars are at work.
If it's in June and they're asking, you say, okay, we're gonna have to wait a couple of months, but I promise it'll.
Exactly. And let's hope not to have a devastating hurricane or something.
So the RGV Transit Authority, it was strongly supported by the COG, as you said, and Valley Metro.
Right.
So what would this have done for a regional bus service?
I think everybody is able to opt in, McAllen and Brownsville, and to be part of a larger system, and routes, and South Padre as well. And then if there is a funding source that we are able to create, well, everybody would get a piece of the pie, so to speak, to improve
Okay.
the services that they provide.
And that's a big key aspect, is that it's not necessarily having to reinvent the wheel, but about improving their transportation.
Correct. And some of the, at first, some of the worry was, well, if we already have an existing entity, are we going to have to give up our money and put it all into the Regional Transit Authority? The answer is no. So the way we crafted the legislation was that if you are receiving $25, so to speak, you will continue to receive those $25. And that will not have to, go back into the pot. That is your money that you will continue to receive.
So the idea of this is to increase the funds available.
Correct. And have everybody who participates have access to the funds and improve the service. So if you increase the funds, of course, we're looking for a much better service from everybody. Not saying that there's poor service, but I'm thinking about interconnectivity and access for the public.
Yeah. And, as vice chair of the Transportation Committee, we're only talking about a small sector of projects in Texas, your district and this region. But across Texas, how many other transportation projects are going on? You talked about a $26 billion budget.
Right. There are tons of transportation projects in Houston and Dallas and in San Antonio, in El Paso. You have them all over the state. And a lot of it is for congestion relief and addressing, the infrastructure issues that people may have. And so you see them everywhere, in Austin as well. I-35 in Austin, I always say that if I'm not driving out of Austin by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to wait till 7 in the evening, because it just gets so congested. And then by that time, I'm taking the toll road, because you still have to slow down and slow down and slow down all the way through San Antonio. So, there's projects all over the state, and they are continuously going.
So, knowing that there's projects all over the state, there's a $26 billion budget, and, there's more projects than funds. Obviously, we want to get that clear,
yes,
right?
Yes, absolutely.
This regional transit authority, why didn't it pass? What do you think held back the votes?
I think it passed out of the House. Passed out of our transportation committee, passed out of the House, went to the Senate, and it stalled there because the Senate had different priorities. And it's kind of upsetting to think that the priorities that could improve communities wasn't there.
Yeah.
And it definitely wasn't on the work of our local senators. I think it was from senators from other parts of the state. That's when we say people need to, start thinking about, what's happening in November.
Yeah.
And voting in November, because when you have important issues that impact the valley that could potentially improve the valley or other parts of the state, and that's not taken seriously, that's when we have a problem. And that's exactly what happened. It got bottled up into the politics of the Senate or your lieutenant governor saying, we're not playing with the House. They don't want to pass our agenda. So I think a lot of the House bills are going to die. And that's pretty much what happened,
And it's very unfortunate, but it is the reality. That's the environment that you have to operate in. So it's all about putting together leverage.
Correct.
And the greatest leverage that any politician can have is the power of the people, right?
That's right.
The people behind them. So conversations like this that we're having, it's about talking about the issues, about both sides, the pros and the cons, and looking at it and saying what is the greatest good for the greatest number. But most importantly, getting those people out there to be involved.
Correct.
So how do you focus on staying involved with your constituency and educating them?
Going out to town halls, speaking at chamber events, speaking at different club events, and informing them of what's going on, and constantly seeing people, being out in the public. As an elected official, as a state rep, it's always good to be visible and accessible. So when your constituents need to talk to you or want to talk to you about a certain issue, you're there and you're available to them, and especially communicating what's going on in session. One of the best things that we have now is social media.
Yeah.
Like what we're doing today. This is excellent because you're informing the public of what is going on and what the issues are and what the future brings. So, this is just amazing that we're able to do this and be able to relay this information. That is what is very important, is the communication that you have with your constituency. A lot of times I'll go to HEB, and my wife doesn't like it anymore because...
it turns into a town hall?
Yes. So, but I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And the reason I enjoy it, and so many people have asked me, gosh, how can you just stand there and talk? And I said, because your constituents want to know, and they have the right to ask you questions. And that is my job.
Yeah.
When I got elected, that is what I got elected for. And you can't just walk out and hang your head down and I don't want anybody to talk to me. That's not why you were elected. You were elected for the people, and you were elected by the people so that you could represent them. So when they see me at a supermarket, when they see me at a restaurant, I take my time to answer and to talk to them about the issues, because when they took that time to vote for me in the voting booth, I should give them that in return.
And one of the most difficult part is speaking to people that disagree with you or that may not support you. How do you reach out to people like that and say, hey, I'm still your state rep, whether you support me or not?
Right.
I'm the elected official. Let's work together.
Right, and there's a lot of that. You hear, but that is the beauty of democracy, and that is. The beauty of people being able to express their opinions. Just because somebody disagrees with me, I'm not going to hold it against them, and I'm not going to be out there, this person's bad, and this. It's not like that.
Yeah.
And there's, and that brings up a very good point. There's certain people that have walked into the office and, brought up a certain issue, and my chief of staff responded to them. and man, they started going off and going off. Well, you know, there's a time to respect a person's opinion and not chastise them for that. But just like I respect their opinion, you know, you would expect that in return.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. A lot of times, whether a constituent agrees or disagrees, you know, we talk about it, and I respect their opinion, and I understand where they're coming from. And when they ask me, well, why do you support this? Or I give them an explanation because they deserve that explanation. You know,
Yeah.
some people may say you don't need to explain, but yes, you do.
Yeah.
As an elected official, you do need to explain to the public, especially the reason why you have a certain opinion and why you support it or why
Yeah.
you don't.
And you know, the greatest the analogy that I always use is you know, my great grandparents, they were married 67 years, and I was very blessed to see that. And I say, show me a marriage or a successful couple that doesn't argue, disagree,
Right.
or compromise.
Right.
You have to. If
You
not,
have
that relationship is over.
Exactly.
So, you know,
Exactly.
just like a marriage, you know, you got to compromise. You have to understand that you're not always going to agree, and it's okay.
Right. But you always say yes when your wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Happy
She's
wife, happy life.
That's right. She's always right. So.
I'm still working on learning those lessons. There's a proposal that has been out for a long time to merge the 3 MPOs in the Rio Grande Valley. Would this regional transit authority, would that give more funds to the combined MPO if it was full?
I don't think it would have any impact on that. It would definitely not have any impact, but we would have more funds in the valley. And people want to say, well, how many more funds would we have? Well, that's not something that you can come out and, you know, gauge. But one thing I can tell you is that if Harris County could do it,
Yeah.
if Dallas can do it, if Austin can do it, if San Antonio can do it, we surely can do it with 3 MPOs. I mean,
Yeah.
they have 13 different counties. They have 16 different counties, 17 different counties, and all of them are coming together for the greater good of transportation.
Yeah.
And we have 2 counties. You know, we want to bring in Willacy and Star, but we have 2 counties with 3 MPOs, and we still cannot come up with a plan. And I think sometimes we need to set aside what the differences are and think about what the benefits are. And definitely with a large metropolitan area that we have here, and over 1.5 million people in population, to have a seat at the table and say, this is what we need to do for transportation, especially in the valley,
Yeah.
and be a voice on that table, especially with the other big cities. We would be the 5th largest MPO in the state of Texas. We would have a big voice and a great impact, and I think it would show that the valley is working harder. You know, you have a lot of times when you go to Austin, you see the Cameron County MPO that has pretty much been the model MPO across the state of Texas, and I think Pete Sepulveda has done a tremendous job over there in what he does. And you know that Hidalgo County is moving forward and trying to get projects going, and you know, and it may take, you know, some thinking out of the box at times, and but when you look at as engaged as they have been in the past in getting their projects done, you know, I think once you have an MPO that is merged and you have one MPO across the Rio Grande Valley that can sit down, you will see that now we are engaged in the talks when it comes to federal funding and important projects in the valley, instead of saying this is important for this area, this is important for that area. No, we are one region, one valley. We need to think about what's important for the whole valley together.
And so, Regional Transit Authority, in a perfect world, it's passed and it's providing funds, increasing funds for transportation. In a perfect world, you know, our MPOs merge, and the power of an MPO is in the numbers, right? Is in the amount of population and the area that you're covering. Just like in anything at the state level or at the federal level, it's the power of the numbers. So it only makes sense that, hey, we need to work together. But the most difficult aspect is that there's a lot of different parties involved, and when you have multiple different parties involved, it's difficult to you know, all agree. But how confident do you feel about you know, the MPOs merging?
I feel very confident. We can't, you know, chastise those or judge those who are against a merger, but what we can do is let's see if the benefits outweigh,
Yeah.
the bad part about it, the negatives. So, and I think they do. I think the benefits of having merging an MPO and having all the entities together definitely outweighs any negatives. And I think that's what we need to look at is the positives and the benefits from it, and not just the negatives all the time.
Well, we've had a great amount of people tune in. Thank you everyone for tuning in. The next piece of transportation talk that we wanted to discuss was the second causeway to South Padre Island. That's something that we've covered a few stories on it on the Rio Grande Guardian, and I know Mayor Barry Patel is ready for a new causeway.
Yes.
But there's an opportunity here because I have spoken to some people that say, hey, you don't want another bridge, you want a railway.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have another bridge, you're going to have double influx of vehicles on the island, and the island's not getting bigger.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that project and where it's at.
I think the Cameron County RMA is continuing their work on that. I think they are either at the end or getting to the end of their environmental stage.
Yeah.
And they're starting to look at how they're going to fund it. And of course, rail is always an option. I'm big on rail, and I think that's another great idea. And that's where I'm talking about opinions that matter, and that you need to take a look at those. And just because there's a difference of opinion doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means you respect it and you take a look at that. But I think it's headed in the right direction. I think I support any type of infrastructure project, transportation project, whether it be a second causeway, which I think it's supposed to be a tolled causeway. But when you look at the amount of cars that are congested in the lines, on spring break or on Semana Santa or during the summer, it kind of makes you think that we probably do need another causeway.
Maybe some scooters, some segways.
There you go. Or other alternative means of transportation, being
Yeah.
mass transit. As far as the railway, I would support that as well. And why not?
Yeah.
When you can get them across, and but then you have other issues that come into play of where do you put in parking rights, and are you going to have big old garages, and where are you going to set them on Port Isabel side? And that's where the whole spoke and wheel comes, to where you can have some of those parking garages. You have a good bus service that takes you to the rail, the railway, and then you get on the rail and get them across. So there's a lot of things that play into that. So.
And it's very exciting aspect, because the way that I think about it is we're building the transportation infrastructure that hopefully lasts us for a very long time, right? This is going to be long-term investment, and we get to decide how to build it. We get to decide how we want to be transported, what we feel is going to be best for all communities. So it's very exciting, So for all of those watching, I encourage you to get involved in this educational process, so that you can, through educating yourself, can determine, hey, based on the facts, this seems like the best proven thing to do. The next transportation project that has been talked about is the Hidalgo County Loop.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about this Hidalgo County Loop and kind of who you can compare it to. I mean, everyone thinks about San Antonio's loop. When comparing it, you have a loop going around the city, and Hidalgo County is the city here, but it's a county, a little different, right?
Yeah, a little different. I think the first thing we need to do is first of all, look at the funding options that are available in order for us to complete the loop. I know that there's one segment that is about to be completed, that's segment 3, that connects the bridge, and I applaud a lot of the city leaders that supported that, because that was important, an important way of funding a project that was already shovel ready and ready to go for the RMA, and it's a good thing, and it's something that we needed. Now we need to think about 2 other legs, which are State Highway 365 and the International Bridge Trade Corridor, which is IBTC, which is the northernmost leg. A lot of talk have been that IBTC was the first leg that was being developed and looked at and should have been built first, but we're at a point right now that State Highway 365 is the one being the first one that's going to be constructed and getting to the end of the phase of funding. in order to get that done. So I think it's a very interesting loop. I think it's something that does need to be done, especially all around the valley. And when you look at the connections of the International Bridge Trade Corridor along with 365, you're going to have all your trucks coming in from Mexico that are crossing all of our commercial port of entries, and which are, I mean, this is a gateway to the United States. You know, over $95 billion of trade that Texas does with Mexico, and over 60% of produce comes through Far Texas. So that goes north into other parts of the United States. So when you look at the impact that that has, and the amount of trucks that are crossing, and the need for the infrastructure and getting those trucks off, a lot of trucks, they don't want to stop. They want to get on, get on an expressway and not stop at all, and get from point A to point B, deliver it, get back. That's what they want to do. So when you look at building 365, that brings all of the trucks together that are coming across from commercial points, port of entries from Mission, Far, and Donna Rio Bravo, that's commercialized, and then you also have Progresso that's commercialized. When you have all of those goods and commercial vehicles that are coming across, they need a way to get that product north. So they can get on, now they can get on IBTC once that's constructed and go straight north, which brings up another leg, which is State Highway 68. And when you look at that project and you look at State Highway 68, there's been a lot of controversy on where it's going and the routes, and TxDOT has done very well in speaking with the owners and the landowners and selecting a route and going through the whole public process. And I'm very happy that we were able to bring down $85 million just for that project alone, which is a big win. But it's not only for commercial vehicles, and that's the thing, because now you want your residents in the Mid-Valley to have a road to avoid congestion.
Correct.
And State Highway 68 could help alleviate a lot of that congestion and have a northernmost route. And then with that in mind, you're also talking about Monte Cristo in 1925 being a east-west corridor, that State Highway 68 will connect to Monte Cristo, and now that will be a road that connects from I-69 Central or 281 all the way to the new causeway in South Padre. So many projects being looked at and hopefully developed here in the future in South Texas, so that we could have more congestion relief, more routes for our people to travel, and alleviate a lot of the congestion that we see right now on the roads.
And you just went from the Mid Valley to Edinburgh to South Padre Island. And you think about all of the economic development that will come from those transportation improvements. I mean, you can't even calculate it.
and one thing, Mark that you had just brought up is the Mid Valley, Edinburgh. This is true regionalism, and that's what we can do when the Valley works together. Is thinking of routes and ways to help people to travel across different corridors in the Rio Grande Valley. And then the other idea is you're going to take that Monte Cristo and head west, and that'll get you into Stark County. So that's another route. And you have a northernmost route, which would be that. You have the southernmost route being 281 or Military Highway, and then you have Expressway 83. So different ways for people either to travel, evacuate, or alleviate congestion.
And we're very excited to hear all this transportation talk and infrastructure, but I think people will be most excited when the construction is done.
Right.
Because the in-between aspect, it sounds great talking about all the projects, but the in-between, when you have to drive through those construction zones and you have to slow down, it's a personal investment. You're investing this extra time, but in the long run, you're going to be able to drive faster those new corridors. So.
And the other thing is, why does it take so long? I wish we could just throw pavement and getting going, but that's not how it works. I wish it was that easy, but you have environmentals and public involvement and purchasing right away and plans and schematics and development, and then you get going finally to construct it. So.
And all of those things for the community safety.
Correct.
Most important, The other things that happened this session, you talked a little earlier about basically it being a fight between the Senate and the House, and there were some things that were prioritized. One of the bills, SB4, was something that was talked about not only in the state of Texas but nationwide. Talk to us a little bit about that and that experience, and and how you feel about SB4.
Well, I mean, I was against SB4, and I continue to be against SB4. Not so much because on the surface, a lot of people think about it as it's not that big of a deal. It's just you have people that committed a crime and you're just turning them over. No, that's not exactly what SB4 does. You know, SB4 will make a lot of the communities less safe. And how is that? How will it make it less safe? Well, now you may have undocumented immigrants that have seen a crime or have been a victim of rape or a victim of theft or whatever it may be, and they're not going to report anymore. They're too afraid to go out and report any type of crimes because they're afraid that now they will be picked up and arrested and deported. Which a lot of people say, well, they're not here legally, so I understand. But the fact is, we're making our communities much less safe. Yeah. And the percentage of ICE detainers that had not been complied with was 0.002%. Maybe about 63 people, 63 times that it had not been complied. And it was not complied with for other reasons. Not just because we want to say, no, we're not going to turn this person over. It's because there was a conflict with a name or a date of birth or an address, and you really could not find out if that person was who they said they were, who they weren't, and the conflict there of who that was. So that was a main issue, along with the fact that a lot of times you have overcrowding in jails and prisons, and what are you going to do? If you think a person is not a citizen, then you're going to keep them, and a much more violent offender that is a citizen, you're going to release them.
Yeah.
So now this requires you to keep that person, and now you're releasing much more violent offenders. So that's where it also becomes an issue. And along the same lines is, the Show Me Your Papers bill obviously did not work in Arizona, and it was the root of a lot of problems. And I have a big problem with people just because of the color of our skin pulling us over. And I hear different opinions, and that's where we say, hey, we respect opinions, right? But I hear a lot of people say, well, if you're a citizen, don't worry about it. Correct. But I'm a citizen, and I don't want anybody asking me if I'm an American citizen or not.
Correct.
Yes, I am one, and I'm proud to be one. But I don't think it's right for a police officer to pull me over and just ask me if I'm a citizen or not. I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that leads to racial profiling. I think it leads to much more severe consequences that come along with that, and people being picked on, and I don't believe in that. And I think everybody's a human being here, and we should treat them as such with respect and dignity, and not be pointing fingers at people. Because I can guarantee you, today it's September 11th, and those people, those cowardly terrorists that flew those planes into the buildings, their last name wasn't Perez, Martinez, Gonzalez. They were here legally on passports, and they flew those planes into buildings. And I think that's what we need to be looking at, and not people because of the color of their skin and because they come from our South, our brothers to the South.
And this was a bill that caused a lot of tension at the Capitol. Yes. And a lot of people. I personally know a lot of friends that stopped talking over disagreements over this. There's been a lot of sheriffs that have come out in support of it. And then there has been, law enforcement that have come out against it based on personal experience, that it's not going to make it a safer place. The people for it say, hey, they don't have to ask for their papers, but they have the ability to ask. That's what SB4 is. So there's both sides, to look at it.
And I think when you start targeting elected officials and you start targeting, city council members because they don't have a policy in place, or they have something in place that says you're not going to ask for papers, and for the government to come in and say, well, if you do that, then we can remove you from office. Well, wait a second. They were elected by the public. Yeah. Let democracy work. And I think it's just the end game is much bigger than what people actually think. Yeah. And I think when you have the government meddling in now telling and removing local control, like what certain parties have always said, that they're all about local control, but removing and constantly removing local control, it becomes a problem. Yeah. And that's why you have, school boards. That's why you have city councils that are in place, and they're elected by the people. And if they're not doing a good job, they go through the democratic process and they elect somebody else. But I don't think it's right for us to be sticking our hands and meddling into local business.
And at the federal level, at the Texas state level, there's been a lot of things that people agree on, disagree on, and the direction, the bills that are being talked about, and the focus. And the one thing that I can say is, regardless, both sides, it's bringing people out, because people
Right.
want to be active now, because they finally are feeling, hey, I have to talk, because if I don't, who is? And the positive thing about that is that hopefully voter turnout increases, people get involved, and they share their voice, and hopefully the elected officials listen, right?
Correct. Correct.
It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, and historically the United States, Texas has always persevered through these times, and we will always continue to. So it's very exciting. It's just one part of the process that you have to go through, and sometimes you have to debate it out, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct. That's
you got to
correct.
put together your SWOT analysis and bring all your bullet points. But
which is a good thing that we have courts, because now a federal court has already called it discriminatory, and so SB4 isn't in effect.
Yeah.
Or the Show Me Your Papers bill isn't in effect. So, and Texas has a long history of discrimination, so that just adds more to what they've done in the past and these types of bills that they have passed lately.
And that's the other beauty is about the checks and balance that we have.
Correct.
And this is a perfect example of the system working. It doesn't work as fast as we want it to sometimes, right?
Right.
But
Exactly.
but it does work. Representative Martinez, we've been on the live stream going on an hour. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
1 hour.
Talked a little bit about transportation, the session. We know that there's going to be a lot of ongoing projects happening, and we look to have you back to get an update on transportation and the other things happening. But before we end it, anything that you want to add to anyone watching?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for being out there. Make sure that you continue to get engaged in the issues, and contact us if we can do anything or help you in any way, or maybe even talk to you about certain issues that you may have as a concern, or something that may be of importance to you. You can always look us up on our website, armandomartinez.com, or contact us here at the office, 956-447-9473. And with that, I'm proud to be your representative. Just remember, Ando Comando, right?
Ando Comando.
Thank you. God bless you all. And let's remember our firefighters, police officers, emergency workers, and of course, all our men and women in uniform, both here and abroad, that keep us safe every day.
Well, thank you, Representative Martinez, and to everyone that tuned in, thank you so much. These conversations are all about educating one another, coming together, and at the end of the day, moving forward together. So until next time, talk to you soon.